And do you want to do a quick intro? We'll do some intros here
Sure.
before
So my
wrapping
name
up.
is Luke Kratz. I'm a principal engineer at Bazaarvoice. We're an e-commerce company that helps big e-commerce brands kind of manage user-generated content, mostly ratings and reviews, but we also do images, video, things like that. We use AI pretty extensively, and we have for a long time at the company. We use Arize as part of our MLOps stack, and we've been using generative AI kind of well, everywhere. Everyone's using it now, right? But we really see it as another tool in our tool belt to help focus on new products and experiences for our clients. So we're digging the evals. So that's why we're here today to talk about our journey there. It's been
Awesome.
pretty fun. It's saving us a lot of time on my team, the machine learning engineers. We love them because they make our
Well,
lives easy.
this will be a good conversation. I think given we're a couple minutes in here, let's hop in. So those of you who've done this before, feel free to ask questions and drop it in the chat. We love it to be conversational. And one note from Rodolfo already is like, could you mention specific use cases? And we'll definitely do that. We'll hop in and talk specifically how they're being used, what evals are. And I'm one of the founders of Arize, technical founder. So I'm also in the trenches every day too with users of LLMs in our software. I'll talk a big picture of like what an eval is, and then have Lou kind of give some examples of like where he's using them. What an eval is really using an LLM to evaluate, essentially the output of typically another LLM system. And it could be very specific. In this example, I have like a retrieval span eval, but I can also have an entire QA. So what was the answer of the entire system? So there's a lot of, at different levels of your system, you can use these for your LLM generated outputs. And typically they are a template, so describing what you want it to do. In this case, it's an eval for a retrieval, trying to understand if the retrieval was correct or not. There's some model params typically and some LLM along with that. Lou, what are some kind of use cases that you're using evals for today?
Yeah, so one of the ones we're doing right now is we're trying to build a question and answer system based on some data that we have gathered from consumers. So the idea is, you want to go buy a pair of shoes, you can go to the website, ask a question about that pair of shoes, and it tries to answer it using existing consumer reviews. So the way we'll use the eval in that case is we actually have kind of decades worth of data of example questions consumers have asked and actual answers that our clients have provided to them. So we can directly compare the answers that our clients wrote to ones generated by the AI system. So we have an eval that says, hey, here are two answers to this question. Are they effectively the same? And you get into a little bit of nuance there with language, but it's a way of asking if they're correct when we know the correct answer. We really view the evals as, or the way I view them, are prompts that are trying to classify, you'll talk about the types later, trying to classify pieces of text. So it's really helpful for us to understand, hey, that system is working. It gave the correct answer or an incorrect answer, or that one didn't work. Perhaps a simpler example is one I think that Phoenix has called that does harmfulness detection. It makes sure there's nothing hateful or inappropriate in the text. And obviously you could do that with maybe a more traditional machine learning system, maybe a BERT model or something. But it's really easy to just crank out a prompt that says like, hey, make sure this thing isn't insulting anyone, and put that in there and get the result back. Just like yes or no, is it inappropriate?
And I've been seeing people use it almost like instead of sometimes even labeling, like they might have had
Yeah.
a human go add these labels on it prior, but now you're using evals to just add labels to data easily. Is that kind of your view as well?
Yeah, exactly. So like what we're really talking about is I want to label my output of my machine learning system. It might be, it's usually an LLM right now, but it doesn't have to be. And that's what's really exciting here is like we're using it to grade our machine learning output, the output of our machine learning system, instead of having to have humans go in and label them. So a great example with that question and answer one, our question is like, hey, if I built a Q&A bot that tries to answer consumer questions, how often is it correct and how often is it wrong? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and our first approach was to go and have a bunch of people go and label a bunch of data for us to say like, hey, I generated this output. How much of them are wrong? And we sent them 1,000 examples and it took them a day and a half. And it cost us a bunch of money. And with an eval, I can do that same amount in about 10 minutes and it costs us pennies. So it's really about labeling those things as correct or incorrect.
Yeah. And one question that someone had here is are you talking about evals, OpenAI evals, or a different tool? And our example right now is I'm showing a lot of like the Phoenix library, which is a simple library for doing evals. It's actually different than OpenAI. So OpenAI evals it is really about a model level eval. So if you go to Hugging Face, you can see these open data sets, leaderboard of models, helps you maybe choose your model, of the open source set or of the set against some open tasks. What ends up happening is once you've chosen that model, you have like 50 tasks in your business. Customers will have a lot of different things they want this model to do. And a lot of that's about making sure this thing, that's about finding a prompt. And so it's not so it's not like choosing a model. You're trying to use a prompt to really label data. And so we call them task level evals. We try to differentiate from what is the model leaderboard, pick a model because there's a prompt associated with it and you're trying to like generate some output. You're trying to evaluate your LLM system with a task level prompt here. And so the
Yeah, I
prompt,
really think about it
yeah.
as like there's the model, which we now call the foundational model, right? GPT, Claude,
Mhm.
Llama. Then there's the prompt, which is as developers, that's the new model. That's the thing I'm building. I'm probably not changing my foundational model too much, but I am building a prompt that is going to generate some output. Well, how good is that output? That's where the evals come in. It's a second prompt to evaluate the results of the first one.
Yeah. And let me kind of, I'm getting a bunch of questions. I'm just going to pull up something real quick um, just the Phoenix docs to kind of show, someone's asking like, well, what models integrated? Normally we're open and your model might be driven by your company. I think in Lou's case, it's Bedrock, the team's centered on it. So they're using Claude. We're agnostic. You can use from a model perspective, there's you know Palm, Vertex, whatever. But what you want to make sure is the evals you're running and what you've decided to run against. So there's some template associated with it, and then there's performance metrics on a model by model basis for this data set, this template. And you want to make sure the model you choose, along with the task you're going to go after this eval on is going to work. And so part of this is performance testing, these tasks, in this case, it's relevance eval or hallucinations or whatever you're after, template plus model plus task gives you an idea of whether it's going to work or not. And a lot of times, I guess, if you're in a corporation, again, you might have your model already chosen for you, and you're trying to see if you can get that to work. Um, Going back to the evaluation types, like, do you want to let's talk a little bit about these. There's numeric, which is like a numeric output. Like, give me a probability as between 0 and 1 that this is correct. There's categorical ones like, is this answer correct or incorrect? There's multi outputs, which we're going to tell you really quickly here we don't love, which is trying to do two things at once and get two outputs. People are trying to save money in this approach. And then there's multi-class, which could be like 1 of 5 stars or any of those. highly recommend don't do the pure numeric. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. I think most of us, most me and, I would say me and Lou are probably ending up in either categorical binary or the multi-class options in this set here.
Yeah, I found the numeric, the large language models are bad at math, right? Like we
Yeah.
know that. Numeric is going to give you exactly that problem. We use almost
Yeah.
exclusively categorical binary or categorical multi-class,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what we're trying to measure. So like if it's correct or incorrect, use binary, that's the right one. We use the multi-class quite a bit because there tends to be nuance that
Yeah.
happens between correct or incorrect. We kind of want to understand where that is, especially so we can get that trade-off of like, well, the user expects it to say X and we're like 80% there. We're still going to show that. That's still something we can ship.
Yeah.
It's a 4 out of 5 stars or a 3 out of 5 stars. That helps our product managers understand the quality. The other thing that's great about multi-class is if you're writing your own template for the eval, you can define in that prompt what characteristics you expect in each class. So I have an eval that I use that's a 1 to 5 star. And I'm like, my 1 star is like, there's nothing here. My 5 star is it's perfect. And I can say like, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. The LLM is usually pretty good at understanding that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to say like, okay, this is a 3 because of X, Y, and Z. So it'll, you remember like we've been playing with prompt engineering for a year now, or however long we all got into it, right? And you can give it instructions, and for the most time it'll follow it. Same thing happens here. Like tell it exactly that the more context you give it about what those multi-classes mean, the more you'll be able to trust the result and really understand when you look at the distribution of these scores on all your data at the end, what's happening under the hood within your data, which is that's the value, right? Like I got 100% correct, or I got 90% correct, and that's great. And then you can, or none of it correct, and then you got to revisit, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I've been impressed by I've been impressed by the results. I've incredibly impressed by the results I've seen. Like it's almost magical, to be honest, on like all the
Yeah,
work you used to have to do to get labels and what you can do now to do it. This was kind of the hint we gave earlier. Like some people are trying to save money and do like your prompt will try to get 2 answers at once. And highly recommend start simple. Like
yeah,
you're asking the model to do 2 cognitive things at once. It might be able to do it, but start simple is our recommendation. Probably do 2 separate ones. And then when you feel confident, you get enough test data that you might want to go back and try this. I just wouldn't start here. I think
yeah.
Lewis.
I totally agree. I wouldn't don't. You're trying to take a shortcut that you're going to pay for later. And, you're trying to save an hour now, and it's going to cost you a day
Yeah.
down the road. The 2 separate. You got to remember, like you're asking an AI model to evaluate another AI model, and
Mhm.
the only reason this is working is that the evals themselves are a much simpler task in that they are a classifier and not a generator,
You're right.
right?
Yeah.
So like we're asking the same model that was used to generate some text to then classify it. So you can easily end up in a place where you've ended up where the models are just agreeing with each other and you're not getting anything useful out of it, right?
Yeah.
So keeping the evals simple and straightforward will help you avoid that. And also you have to, as we'll talk about more, you have to benchmark these evals against known results. So benchmarking a multi-output one is going to be more tedious and annoying than, okay, I got one binary one, benchmark that, and then go run it on your data. So yeah, totally agree. Like keep it simple, straightforward. You got one working, bake it, make the next one. It'll also help you kind of as your project evolves, really understand like, okay, I have my correctness eval, that's doing one thing. I have my faithfulness eval and see those distributions and see how they're correlated and not, and knowing that like that correlation is happening independently instead of jointly is just reassuring to know.
Yeah. Agree. And I think there's other things other little nuggets of insights. This is one where be careful with numerics and scores. Like I've seen some folks try to do a probability between 0 and 1. Um, just the distribution we're seeing when you do a score like that just is not normal. It's there's just it there's something about there's tokens are discrete, right? Like there's something about the LLMs themselves that struggle with these like ranges. So if you're gonna do a numeric eval, recommendation is like keep it into categories of 0 and 1, like a binary 1 or 0. That's much more usable than just a range. When don't do a range score for evals. Haven't seen good results. Um, this is one that's been amazing. Uh, like explanations. We've added this to the library here, but you can add little notes to templates that allow you to get an explanation out of why it classified or labeled the data as such. Here's an example where the query is like, what triggered the Civil War? This eval, which is trying to tell you if this reference content, this reference chunk returned from the vector DB actually contains information to answer this question. That it's kind of what the eval is trying to tell you in the label column there, relevant or irrelevant. And you get this explanation of like why it thought it was relevant, like where did it find that information. So very, very useful. Obviously, it's going to be more costly, more expensive. Maybe it's something you do in troubleshooting in the beginning, but we found it's amazingly useful for understanding. It's like almost magical. It's like, there's this whole field of explainability in the traditional space, and it's like almost magical to get a sentence of why why it made its decision.
Yeah, this has been a game changer for me. Like I saw this trick pop up in Llama Index's evals a few months ago, and I tried it. And you say it's more expensive for the LLM because you're paying per token. That's true, but like humans cost more than LLMs right now. And having an explanation, so like if I can look at a false positive and understand, well, why did the LLM say that? Or if I'm benchmarking the eval and it's getting it wrong, I can understand why and go and revise my prompt and run it again and try to eliminate that case. It is such an accelerator on the kind of flywheel of a machine learning system to understand why it's behaving that way. And it's like, I showed that to some of my coworkers and they were just like, it's once I said, just ask it to explain why. And they're like, really? And I was like, yeah, it's like amazing. And it accelerated our eval development and our prompt engineering revision extremely fast. Cause sometimes I'll say like, oh, is this relevant? And what the LLM thinks the word relevant means is not what I think the word relevant means. So I need to change my vocabulary in the prompt, and then suddenly it worked. And that all comes out of that explanation bit.
Yeah, I agree, and it's incredibly helpful. If there's one thing you take away from this outside of the stick with categoricals, it's probably try explanations too. There's a previous question that said, I'm going to drop this to you, Lou. Would using n stars not provide the same problem as numerical? Would it not be better to ask a question that was more, strongly agree, disagree, neutral? Is it better to have those? I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. Like, I don't know if we've seen as many
Yeah,
problems.
I've been
Yeah.
playing with that. So I've noticed that if you present the options to the LLM in the eval prompt as integers and say like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, then it understands it's categorical. If
Yeah.
you present it as floats, it sometimes gives you like a 3.5 in there.
Yeah.
Or if you say like 1 through 5, it might do that. If you're concerned about that, just stick with those words: agree, strongly, disagree, neutral. Like as long as it's a categorical type label, like it'll be fine. Or you can even use tokens like the number 5 and the word star together with no space, right? Like,
Yeah.
which makes it easy to parse out. Yeah, to avoid that. That's a good question.
Good question. There's a quick question from Andy on the Arize Phoenix tools. So Phoenix is our open source solution, which I think she dropped a link into. There's a bunch of eval libraries, eval examples in there. And it does work for both foundational models. There's a bunch of integrations we also have for non-foundation like llama or stuff you might want to be running locally. I think light LLM is one integration that can allow you to plug into those. So we have a bunch of model options there. Yeah, we don't could be local or foundational. Um, Offline versus online. I'll give a quick note on this. Like, where do evals run right now? Um, there, and you'll hear this more and more as the ecosystem evolves. Most of us are running this offline, meaning like in code, prior to sending the results to some system. And might be Arize where we're tracking the evals over time, and giving you eval breakdowns. But running in code versus systems like our cloud platform will eventually be running these evals, periodically or on data or, so there is going to be this offline versus online worth just mentioning. As you're thinking about it, most people are running this in code right now. Lou, do you want to talk about like what it takes to create a custom
Oh yeah, sure.
post?
So as Jason mentioned, we're an AWS shop. So we hopped on Bedrock pretty early, and we liked that because we didn't want to deal with the data restrictions and privacy issues with OpenAI. And we get better throughput with Claude 2 than we do with GPT 3.5 and 4. So we said, oh, let's just copy and paste them into Claude. And that didn't work at all, because you got to remember the restrictions of your LLM under the hood. So one of the things that happened with us is Claude actually, Anthropic actually posts a GPT-4 to Claude guide on how to things you have to change in your prompt. And one of the big things that got us was like, well, Claude likes XML as opposed to like Markdown or JSON, which GPT-4 is pretty good at. So that was the big change. And once we kind of tweaked the prompts to do that, it just worked great. That was like a fast early win. And then we've started creating our own templates and tasks after we kind of hopped onto that LLM. So like it was like we chose a model. You got to understand what that model was trained to do and how it expects prompts to be formatted. Follow that guide, like first test. Then when we got to creating our own templates, that wasn't too bad. That was pretty fun. We enjoyed that. But we didn't know if it was actually working, because it's like, okay, it says it's correct, but like you've created a second model to grade your first model. You have to evaluate the accuracy of that second model too. So that's where benchmarking it comes in. So Jason's illustrated here, you got to create test data. So like if you're creating an eval to measure whether or not your responses are correct, you got to go label some question data as correct or incorrect, and then see if the eval matches your human labels. Now that's not like a new workflow for any of us, right? Like we're machine learning engineers, so like we're used to getting data labeled, we know how to do it quickly and things like that. But what's great about it is like I only need to label maybe 1,000 pieces of responses for my eval to know my eval is working, and then I can use it to go measure my system on 1,000,000 pieces of content, right? So it really speeds it up. Like you do have to do a little bit of labeling to benchmark your eval, especially if you've written your own. Arize publishes benchmarks for their publicly available data sets, but like if you're using any of your own data, I recommend just labeling, even a few hundred will give you confidence that that eval is working correctly. Then you can use it on your big set and you're good to go. So that's kind of a workflow for creating your own eval.
Totally. And I think the thing that like I feel like is, resonates is it's something like, those of us in the ML space have been used to, like create a data set. What's really nice, I think your point here is that like normally you'd have to create a lot of ground truth data to train your model on. So like you're having to like go out and do it. You don't need that much here to make sure your eval is running correctly. I'm literally like Lou's saying 100 points, 1,000 points. It's not that much. So put a little time into creating, I'll talk about this in creating the data set stuff, but put a little time into creating like errors, seeing how well it does. But huge scale advantages here. Another question from Shantan here was, are these evals primarily for NLP or can they be extended to like code?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if the
Yeah.
LLM can do it. I thought the question was going to be, can we extend it to diffusion models? And I'm like, oh, I wish. One day, one day. One other tip I have for creating your own eval is, I think you talk about this a little bit later, or I don't recall, but like when I was talking about that XML stuff, like this is a regular prompt. If you give it examples, you're going to get better results than if you give it no examples. So if you want your output in a certain format, give it like 2 or 3 examples, and your eval is going to work a lot better. Same with your categorical categories, right? Like if you're doing agree, disagree, whatever, or your 1 to 5 rating, or your binary, or false, explain what those things are in the
Mhm.
prompt, and you're going to get you're just going to get much better results than if you omit it. So like the minute we started putting example outputs in our evals, like everything just got really, between that and the XML, everything just got like really great.
But I mean, there's so much. I feel like there's so much you learn too on the ground. This is
Yeah.
kind of one of those things. You do need to guardrail your output that the LLM's output. So you're using this LLM to generate this class, but some of them can be verbose. Claude tends to be more verbose than GPT-4, for example, but you will get like an uppercase. You will get a period every once in a while in front of it. Um, Sometimes you get a whole sentence. And so like what you want to do is extract the classes cleanly, if it's very clear what class it is, and get a really clean output. So one of the things that we think about is this, and it sounds like Lou, you've had some
I've
time to
spent a
play.
lot of time on this. So
Yeah.
my number one tip here, I've had zero problems with this since I started doing this, is put the example outputs like I mentioned. And when
Mhm.
you do that, like put it in some like really well-defined structure. So like we put it in XML for Claude. So I start with a response tag, and then I close that response tag after the example. In GPT, you can do it with colons or tables or whatever you want. And then right at the end of your prompt, put the first part of your example output. Because remember, these LLMs are trained to continue and predict the next text. So if at the end of my prompt, I start with the open response tag to Claude, and I then know I get exactly the XML I want back, and it just works. I have not had to deal with any gnarly case issues or any punctuation or any too much verbosity since we started doing that. Just say like, here's my response, output format, and then start the format at the very end of the prompt, and it will continue it for you. Remember, these things are supposed to generate and continue sentences. So let it do that in your favor.
Yep.
So I should have made a slide for you for that, because it's a really great trick. Well, maybe I can follow up with you for that.
Love it. I mean, it's just, I think everyone who kind of goes and does this is going to hit it. And what we've also seen is, for GPT-4, we've added function support, which is another way of getting clean outputs. So you don't get all, you've got to deal with the LLM you have, but some have equal advantage of options, or not equal, things you can do. Do you want to, you hit this a bit.
Yeah, a
This
couple
is
of
the
times I've hit
yeah.
this. Yeah. So Claude likes XML, so use this. And this is a good example. So you say, here's the text inside the text tags, here's my example outputs. The very end, you can say like, just have that open text tag, and it'll spit out the result in the way you want it. And it works with nested XML too. You can pull the same trick with Llama and GPT-4 if you're using a data format that they understand well. So like I know GPT-3 wasn't great at JSON. They claim they fixed it in GPT-4. I never went back and checked. um, we have all these like output parser libraries for LLMs because of this problem. But like if you just pick the format it's used to seeing and start the tag for it, it will complete it, and you're good to go.
Yep. And these are kind of like the little in the trenches things you learn as you go. Um, this just kind of hints at some of the data set creation stuff we hinted at, we were talking about before. Um, One way we've done it is start with like a set of good examples first, and then create errors in those good examples. That's kind of one, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. And if you're manually doing things, we typically aim for maybe a 50-50 distribution of like good examples, bad examples. And then we, have variations of this example might be like, maybe you're doing a code functional eval. Does this code do what the person, this paragraph says it should do? And you might have some examples of good code, but then you might have something simple like a syntax error. You might have something more complex like a simple bug. You might have something even more complex using like async calls or something like that. So you might have some variations of those problems that you add to the data set to see how well it catches those errors. And this gives you, these data sets help give you an ability to test whether what you have is your eval is going to do what you want. And what you can do is sometimes you can bootstrap in the beginning, keep it simple, and then as you get production data, you might add in those production examples. A lot of people are taking examples from production and adding it back into the data sets oh, this is a great example of a failure, for example. So this is kind of one of the recommended things, harder things to do, but again, it doesn't take that many examples or use cases to do this. A couple days, a day, like create some data. And things to watch out for when you're doing this. As you use well-known public data sets, the models have been trained on those. So if you're trying to ask it to do something that data set, it kind of likely it's been trained on. So as you're thinking about the data sets to use, that's something we think about a lot. Synthetic examples, it's a nice way to bootstrap, to be honest. Like you have a model generate a bug or generate a problem or generate a bad summary. There's some risk in that. Like, is the model detecting it, it generated its thing, or is it detecting the problem you want? But it might be a good way to bootstrap it until you get production data. So that is something we see out there, people doing.
Yeah, I'd be careful about asking a model generate a bad summary, because it'll generate enough bad summaries for you if you're just trying to summarize anything.
Totally, totally. So yeah. So someone's asking just what stack you're using.
Yeah, I can talk about that if we got time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we use Claude hosted on AWS via Bedrock. So we're not self-hosting our models. I might play with Llama because it's, Llama 2 because it's open source, but I haven't yet. But that's been good for us because all of our engineers are already integrated into AWS. So like use the one that you're already using in your stack. I haven't seen enough of a difference to make me say, oh yeah, you got to go use that one or use that cloud provider. If you follow the guides for what the model expects, you're going to get 90% of the value out. So use the one that's easiest for you. We are doing some RAG stuff. We're not using any specific techniques, classic RAG. Classic RAG. I know RAG's like really new. But like we're just doing we're chunking the text up. Just follow anything Jerry Liu does, and I've tried it. But he's way, like, his guides are more advanced than what I'm playing with right now. I just have the regular vector DB chunked stuff happening. We haven't productionized it yet, so that's still on the roadmap. We do build our own RAG pipelines right now because it's all offline experimentation. When we go to productionize it, we'll probably use a service. There's a lot of hosted vector databases out there that do k-nearest neighbor search. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Actually, at Bazaarvoice, we have our own in-house k-nearest neighbor vector database search that I wrote like 6 years ago based on locally optimized product quantization, because at the time there were no hosted vector data. And I can't wait to retire that thing, because now I can just pay a few cents to Amazon to host it for me. And we're not fine-tuning any LLMs right now. I don't think that fine-tuning is where the real sweet spot is for us. I have read a bit about how fine-tuning can improve your RAG, but like the real value of LLMs and the beauty of the RAG technique is that you can inject your own knowledge into it without fine tuning it, right? And the reason I love that is because if I say, hey, here's 50 pieces of reference information, answer this question. I can also say, answer this question and cite your source. And the LLM will do that. And then I can say to the user, here's my answer to your question, and here's why. And that AI now becomes explainable to the user. And if the AI makes a mistake, it's not opaque anymore. So for us, like, fine tuning would actually be a mistake. RAG is nice for those kind of things because it really makes it transparent to the user what's going on. And that's really important to people right now. Like, we're all technologists. We're really excited about LLMs and the capabilities here. But like, my mom is like, well, why did it say that? Like, if you've ever use an LLM to do something bad, like I was talking to a coworker who said they were trying to use it to help their grandfather with a crossword, and it could not for the life of it understand that the third letter was a D. Like, because the LLM just isn't able to do that, right? So like, the average user, if you just explain the result a little bit with that RAG technique, it's great. So like, we haven't had to fine tune the LLMs. I know there's some interesting work out there around fine tuning the LLM or distilling LLMs to save a little money, and I'm definitely going to look into that. I haven't done it yet because we haven't gotten to that scale yet. But I also know there's some work around fine tuning LLMs to make your RAG work better. So like, you fine tune on just the query side or do an embedding projection, all those kinds of tricks. So yeah, I haven't needed to fine tune one yet. I'm sure I will in the future, but we're still getting our feet wet. So
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I think there's one more question here on the site, the source question. If you ask the element site,
yeah,
how can you be sure? I think some people are actually returning reference links from so people are returning reference links based upon the chunks returned from RAG. So some folks are doing that. Are you adding that to the template as well? Like asking it, like adding the URL, adding the chunk and asking it to cite what
yeah.
it
I just have I
is?
put all the data in from the RAG and
Yep.
like put an XML like ID, and there's a
Yep.
UID in there, text and whatever. And then when I say give me the answer, I say like, cite your sources, put the IDs in some brackets, and the UIDs are in there. And I haven't had it hallucinate a UID yet. Uh,
Cool.
I
And
I think it's a possibility. Do I trust it? Heck no. Like, so far it's been doing pretty well on that job, actually. I
and
haven't had to refine that prompt too much.
worth noting, Cristobal, is we do actually in Phoenix have an eval for reference link evaluation. So the links
Oh,
returned by the
nice.
guru can actually be checked, and we download the page, we check it. Um but that's a really common one is reference links right now and making sure those are correct.
Yep.
Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Lou, for joining us, and amazing experience, and deep in the trenches.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason. Always a pleasure. And I obviously like to talk, so I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one in a month or two to
Sure.
get the more advanced version.
Yeah,
Awesome.
awesome.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye.